Story 1. He's worked in the Senate for years, and he was probably friendly with nearly every senator, so it makes sense that they would be more likely to vote him in. Story 2. He's by far the most normal pick of the litter. Typical vanilla Republican, plus he's already a senator, so all the Democratic senators voting in his favor have a better sense of who he is and how he operates. Story 3. He is actually qualified, regardless of how one feels about his politics or past actions. Donald Trump made it very clear that he was willing to nominate grossly unqualified cabinet secretaries. Democrats in the Senate understand the importance of soft power and saw what Donald Trump did to it last time around. He was the best option they were going to get. Plus, he is a senator and, generally speaking, senators are adults and typically play nice or go full cronyism, depending on one's point of view, with members of their club. Story 4. Senators vote for each other and colleagues, especially for positions seen as nonpartisan, such as top diplomat. Hillary Clinton received 94 votes and 2 no votes for her confirmation as Secretary of State. Story 5. Rubio is the sort of person the president traditionally gets to nominate. He's a partisan, but Trump won the election, so he gets his people. Rubio is still classically the sort of person who holds that job government experience capable of speech in full sentences. The other nominees are increasingly fringe cranks. The guy who cuts a bear's head off in Central Park and drives around with it for a while isn't classically on the president's menu in the same way as a senator. Traditional etiquette is that you get your partisans, but they have to be the sorts of people who could actually do the job. Trump's other nominees are based only on willingness to support him. Story 6. As much as I hate him, he is not completely insane. He is a total fool for being loyal to Trump after the way he was treated, but that's a different matter. Story 7. He is a senator and they take care of their own as long as they are not insane. He has over a decade of Senate experience, which is better than some crazy person like a Muslim being Secretary of State. Overall, he is the best of the worst. Story 8-1. He is qualified for the job. Many of his positions on the world stage align with most Senate Democrats, and you won't agree on everything. Democrats have recently changed their views on cabinet picks due to how influential Elon Musk is in the government. Previously, they wanted to vote based on the merit of the candidates, but now some have publicly stated they will vote no on anyone, no matter what. Story 9. Rubio is within the Overton window of a presidential nominee. I'm sure most Democrats disagree with a lot of his positions, but he generally operates within the bounds of normal political discourse. Most of the rest of Trump's nominees are eccentric. Story 10. Because both parties are now completely bought out by the military-industrial complex and have come around to agreeing with Rubio's George W. Bush-era neoconservatism. Story 11. He generally has some form of coherent logical thought. I don't agree with it all the time, but it's logical how he got to his opinions. Disagreement and consistency aren't the same. I'd rather someone I disagree with but have a sense of how they'll act, rather than a wild card. Rubio is consistently disagreeable to some, but is consistent. He's not a wild card, or at least hasn't egregiously shown that behavior. Story 12. Look at the context of the previous administration's cabinet picks. Alejandro Mayorkas was the most controversial, but even with Mitch McConnell urging the Republicans to vote no, there were still 6 defectors who voted to confirm. The second most controversial pick, as indicated by the votes, was Anthony Blinken, with a 78-22 vote in favor of confirmation. Cabinet picks are generally seen as the president's prerogative, and the Senate's role in the process is to determine whether they are fit for the job, regardless of party affiliation. As such, they are typically bipartisan, even if the minority party is adamantly opposed to doing anything to help the White House. Rubio also has the benefit of having served in the Senate. They all have worked with him in the past and clearly liked him enough. There is a bit of home field advantage when you are a senator up for a nomination before the Senate for an executive position. Unless you are notoriously unlikable, you are likely to have an easier go of it. Lastly, the Democratic Party's strategy has been to withhold votes on more unqualified or controversial nominations and keep the focus on that rather than just opposing literally everything. Basically, do not sweat the small stuff, and Rubio's nomination was seen as the small stuff. Whether or not that is a good decision, I will leave up to you. In summary, Rubio is a senator in front of the Senate for a nomination, so they are more likely to like him. Democrats did not think opposing him was a good use of time, and most cabinet nominees are confirmed in bipartisan votes, even if a large part of Congress is opposed to what the White House is doing. Story 13. He is the most qualified of any Trump nominee, and that is not saying much. But maybe, just maybe, they were sick of his face and took the opportunity to get him out of the Senate. Story 14, because, and this is embarrassing to admit, Marco Rubio is actually qualified for the job. I don't agree with his positions at all, but he at least has experience with this kind of stuff. Story 15, he is definitely a conservative, but he isn't a complete whack job. He ran against Trump in the 2016 primary and would have been a much better president. I think it was partly sending a signal to Trump. If you just chose people like this, it would go way easier. Story 16. The Senate still very much has the exclusive club vibe to it. There are only 100 of them in the whole country, and they have 6-year terms, so they can do whatever they want for 4 years before they have to get back into campaigning for re-election. Meanwhile, the House representatives are pretty much always campaigning for re-election with their 2-year terms. Senators support each other and very rarely criticize each other in public, even across party lines. Story 17, because he is reasonably qualified for the job, he is not a lunatic and he is not an abject moron. I do not at all like him, but I have on rare occasions found myself agreeing with something he has said or done, and that is mostly on foreign matters. This is the best, least objectionable nomination you are going to get, probably for any cabinet position this term, so you take it. He is the adult in the room. He will be ignored like the adults in the last administration were, but oh well. Story 18, because he is at least qualified and somewhat normal, and I say this as someone who doesn't even like him. Plus, the Senate knows Rubio, he was a senator. It also seems he has a decent relationship with Democrats too. Story 19, he is the most normal of the whole group. If he were elected instead of Trump, I would sleep like a baby tonight, not having to worry about 300 different messed up things going on. Story 20. While Rubio is a bit of a doofus, he's not completely irrational or an obvious foreign asset. He's as normal of a Republican as you're going to find these days, and when the bar has been set this low, he's going to look like a fresh bouquet of roses. Story 21. I disagree with him and think he's a fool, but he's at least qualified for the role. It's not like putting an intelligence asset of a hostile country in charge of our own intelligence agencies. Story 22. Fun answer. Wouldn't you vote to confirm him and not share the Senate floor with him? Real answer. He's actually qualified and has shown his understanding of nuanced foreign policy on occasion. Story 23. He's the only one who's not weird. As a Floridian, I'm not a fan, but he's not an alcoholic neo-Nazi, he's probably not a Russian asset, he doesn't have brainworms, etc. He's relatively normal as far as I know, and has been around since before America jumped the shark. Story 24. Now, this may just be a lifetime of cultured, babid, groomed cynicism, but anytime I hear of a nearly unanimous vote for something, I have to ask just how harmful the second choice would have been to most of the participants in that vote. Story 25. He's basically qualified even if people don't like his opinions. It's normal for people to easily get pushed through. Donald Trump went out of his way to find cabinet members who were explicitly unqualified or downright dangerous. Marco Rubio is the person you would put in if you were actually looking for a conservative approach to the position. For most other candidates, you can basically ask, who would I put in this position if I wanted to tear the department down? Robert F. Kennedy is the perfect example. He is anti-qualified. Putting someone in there who was simply incompetent would be a huge upgrade. Story 26. Senators are their own kind of tribe. With a few exceptions like Ted Cruz, senators are on pretty good terms with each other and are amenable to supporting each other regardless of party. Story 27. He's a normal candidate. It used to be nominees were not party line votes and were held up if unqualified. As usual, Democrats continue to play by the rules Republicans disregard. Story 28. I may not like him, but he's actually a pick that makes some semblance of sense. The others are people like a former heroin addict who sounds like a walking corpse and believes vaccines cause autism, on top of not being qualified, and a Fox News host with sexual assault allegations who has been accused of being a serial abuser by his own mother, on top of not being qualified. We also have a WWE executive who allowed and potentially covered up the sexual abuse of children and is nominated to lead the Department of Education, on top of not being qualified. If those people are being confirmed, then it shouldn't even be remotely hard for someone who isn't insane to be confirmed for a role they actually qualify for. Story 29. I do not agree with him on virtually anything. I have never voted for him, and he is pretty much an entity in the state of Florida, but he does actually have the experience for the job, unlike the rest of them. Story 30. As most people here have said, Marco Rubio is qualified for the job. Beyond that, though, there's no benefit to voting against him. Theoretically, imagine the Democrats somehow got enough Republican votes on their side and refused to confirm Rubio. Okay, who would Trump nominate that's preferable to Rubio? For the other nominees, Democrats have largely voted against them because it's difficult to imagine anyone substantially worse for the job. Like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. literally rose to political prominence recently by being anti-vaccine. Who could be worse for the Department of Homeland Security? Story 31. Rubio is qualified and extremely popular in the Republican Party. When the vice president pick was being debated, I remember Rubio was Trump's first choice, but they couldn't get past the two-candidate, one-state rule with them both representing Florida. Rubio brings a lot of donor dollars into the party and is very likable from a bipartisan perspective in Congress. Story 32. People are talking about Rubio being fit for the position, or rather not the worst fit, but I'd like to point out that him moving into Trump's cabinet removes him from office and puts a Florida Senate seat in play. Story 33. Because he is a normal, sensible, experienced appointee. I don't agree with him on anything, but he is a competent adult who I trust to do the job correctly. Story 34. In the world before Trump, he's that one guy at work where you disagree politically, but you know he knows his stuff when it comes to the job. You don't have to like him, but you know he won't mess things up. Story 35. Respected him for his resolve in speaking Spanish on the campaign trail in 2016 and defending his stance. I mean, he was criticized, but I think he has matured into his role as a senator. Ironically, his Spanish language skills probably facilitated the terrible El Salvador prison deal. Story 36. Because Marco has spent the last 10 years in Congress bolstering his foreign policy skills and actively working towards a greater role in statecraft, which hasn't gone unnoticed or unacknowledged by either party. The rest of the nominees are literally political opportunists that are here to harm the United States and its population. Story 37. Rubio, as much as I disagree with him on most issues, is genuinely competent and qualified for the position in a normal Republican administration. None of these other individuals would have even been considered under a normal president. Story 38. Mainly because Rubio was one of them. They know his views, temperament, and his baggage. They also knew he stood against Trump until the whole Republican Party lined up behind him. Ultimately, the Senate's job here is only to block these when there are alarmingly disqualifying factors. The President of the United States should be allowed to pick his cabinet. People like Hegseth and Robert F. Kennedy are obviously unqualified. People like Bondi come with obvious baggage. Story 39. He is qualified for the job, and the hope was that by showing Democrats could be reasonable on qualified nominees, Collins, Murkowski, McConnell, and other moderate Republicans would feel more comfortable voting against the truly unreasonable ones like Hegseth. Story 40. He's the only one who was qualified to do the job. Typically, in most administrations, even if you disagreed with people on policy, they were always qualified for the job. Story 41. Because unlike Robert F. Kennedy and company, he is actually qualified for the job. Do I like him? Not at all. Do I think he is a danger to the Republic? Only insofar as he will be enabling Trump in some capacity. Story 42. Because he is terrible and also roughly 17,000 times better than all the other nominees. They put a guy who does not believe in medical science in charge of medical science and a woman who is widely believed to be compromised by foreign intelligence services in charge of our intelligence services. I'm starting to think things might not, in fact, be going great. Story 43. Because the Senate is a club and he was in it. This is what oligarchy looks like. They protect their own first and do America's business probably never. Story 44. Rubio's experience as a senator gives him the skills in statesmanship and diplomacy. However, if he follows the Constitution in his job, he'll be quickly replaced. Story 45. At this point, who really cares? They are just going to do whatever they want, regardless of legality, the Constitution, or the will of the people. The fascists are in charge now, and the only way to get them out is a full-on revolution. Not a revolution of violence. That is a fight we cannot win. What we can do, however, is simply refuse to work. If enough people just refuse to work at all for 1 month, that would be the end of this nonsense. They would have to meet our demands, and we could pretty much demand whatever we want, such as term limits, outlawing lobbyists, no stock trades for Congress or Senate, their wage being the average income for the district that voted them into office, universal health care, no felons can hold office, and so on. Until people are ready to stand together and fight, nothing will change. The rich will get richer, and the rest of us will be their slaves. So don't bother with discussions about who supports whom or what controversial statement that certain politician made. It's all just theater.